My name is Harrison Wavell, and I am the Schools and Colleges Programme Manager at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. It's lovely to see you all here tonight. Thanks for joining us. In my role, I have been lucky enough to witness the great strides UWC is taking in educational innovation. We have worked in particular on curriculum projects with UWC Mahindra College and UWC Southeast Asia, and we look forward to many more projects in the future. Tonight we will be asking two very important questions. What is the role of education in shaping an economy that works? And what practical steps can be taken by schools to help make this vision a reality? So let's take a wander through the history books. Where did schools come from? The drive for public schooling was fueled by economic necessity. That meant society, in the 18th century, saw the dawn of the industrial age. That meant society needed a workforce that was able to read, write, do sums, and operate machinery. The dynamic was straightforward. The economy led, and education followed. So schools became a means of systematically shaping people to fit their place within the economy and within society. I'm sure many of us who know the work of Sir Ken Robinson will be quite familiar with this story. But the world has changed. So what should this dynamic look like in the context of our current times? Perhaps now, more than at any other point in history, education needs to take a leading role in shaping rather than responding to the economy. Clearly, the economy cannot keep growing endlessly. We cannot keep using finite resources like they will never run out. With a large number of jobs becoming automated, exacerbating the rising competition for work, we need to rethink our assumptions about the economy and the fundamental purpose of education. The narratives of both are unraveling, but rather than seeing this as a disaster, we can see this as a golden opportunity to rewrite them. And there is good urgency for addressing these questions, a good reason for urgency. The global economic landscape is shifting faster than ever before. Technological advances have accelerated globalization and improved the lives of many, but it has also fueled growth in the linear take, make, dispose economy, the side effects of which present many complex challenges. We've seen a decline in real wages, stagnating growth in the West, rising wealth inequality, the rise of tech giants that require very little human labor to extract a huge amount of value, and a heavy environmental toll. How should schools prepare students to face these kinds of complex and interconnected challenges? For our students, it can seem like a terrible burden is being placed on them, but we cannot afford to let resignation and apathy overwhelm them. This is why, from the outset, the circular economy concept has been rooted in the idea that you can do a lot more than just do less. It asks, what if we could design out waste and pollution by creating products that are made to be made again? What if we could keep materials in use, finding value in waste? What if the materials we used weren't toxic and could actually regenerate natural systems at the end of their life cycle? What if businesses could turn a profit by selling a service rather than a product? Since 2010, the Ellen MacArthur Foundation has worked across business, government, and academia to build an economy that can work in the long term. Our work in education is about inspiring people to rethink the future through this positive vision of a circular economy. With the United World College's mission to make education a force to unite people, nations, cultures for peace and a sustainable future, we believe our organization's values and aspirations are aligned. So we look forward to discussing with you this evening this important role of education in shaping this future. Joining us tonight, we have our four speakers who I'm delighted could be here. We have Jack Barry, Cressy Wesling, Cedric Soames, and Proserpina Glamini-Fisher. Moderating, we have Jules Hayward, who leads our education programs at the Foundation. I will now pass over to Jack, our first speaker. I hope you enjoy your evening.
So, good evening. My name's Jack Barry, and first I'd like to say thanks very much, Harry, for inviting me along, and Amelia as well for setting this up. And I have to say I feel like a bit of an imposter because I wasn't fully aware of what UWC was until today. But I'm starting to begin to realise what a fantastic institution it is, and I'm looking forward to the discussions tonight. So I was asked to just give a bit of background to why I'm here and why I'm sitting on that seat, and some of my reflections on the two questions. So my kind of professional background is very much focused on focusing on how we accelerate radical sustainable technologies. And to put that into context, I've worked in pay-as-you-go solar energy in East Africa. I've worked on advanced hydrolysis plants in the UK. And my current work is scaling the world's first commercial scale kite-powered wind energy system. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's essentially flying kites to generate electricity. And at the same time, I'm doing a PhD looking at how we can change our innovation systems to accelerate circular economy transition. And I'm doing that at the University of Strathclyde, and that's where we set up Scotland's first circular economy postgraduate course, which really actually relates to what UWC's ethos is, which is great to see. So I was asked to reflect on what I thought the role of education is in getting us towards a society that works. And on the train down here, I was thinking, well, what is a society that works? And do we not need to agree on what society works before we begin to educate the next generation that comes along? And if we all agree, then do we risk getting locked in to a kind of paradigm akin to capitalism or socialism, where we get locked into one way of thinking, which is quite dangerous? Or do we agree to continuously disagree and keep striving towards maybe not a very predefined goal, but what we ultimately see as progress in disagreement? But whether you disagree or agree, the quote I kind of always come back to is this one. I kind of have to read it out because I can't remember it by memory, but it says, if a factory is torn down but the rationality which produced it is left standing, then that rationality will simply produce another. If a revolution destroys a government, but the system patterns that produced that government are left intact, then those patterns will repeat themselves. And that's really what I see as the role of education, is to break these patterns. Going on to the kind of practical actions that schools and colleges can do to support an economy that works. Just goes directly to this quote: I hear and I forget, I see and I remember, and I do and I understand. And that's kind of an ethos that I've always applied to pretty much anything I've done in my professional career. And if we are always sitting there thinking and talking, although tonight's very important in discussing this, if we just sit and think and talk, even if we put a stick in the sand in the future where we point our next generation towards, if we don't teach them how to get out there and do and get their hands dirty and fail quite a lot, then they'll never get to that stick in the sand. And it's essentially like riding a bike. You can read 1,000 books about riding a bike, and you can be told by the best cyclists in the world how to ride a bike, but if you get on that bike, you suddenly realize you don't know what to do, and you fall off. But when you fall off, you've probably learned way more than 1,000 books. So it's critical that we teach the next generation to do not just see and hear. And that's my points. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Cressy. I went to UWC. I went to Hong Kong 94 to 96. And I think I learned that most of the lessons that I took forward and put into my business, I learned in kindergarten, but they were definitely reinforced by the UWC experience. So when I first came to the UK in 2004, I discovered that 100 million tons of material went to landfill. And I thought that was sort of deeply uncivilized, and I thought I would do something about it. And the material that I fell in love with and focused on was London's decommissioned fire hose. This is what it looks like. Isn't it just gloriously beautiful? This is a life-saving material, 25 years old at its eldest, so they will scrap it after 25 years, even if it has no big tears. But also you get hoses with catastrophic tears at meter 11, and that's it. And I fell in love, and I thought, I've got to do something amazing with this material, and tried loads of things, and failed at loads of things, but kept going, and eventually landed on luxury accessories, as you do, which was really not what I intended. I wanted to make roof tiles. Anyway, we ended up with handbags, and actually it was a brilliant place to be, because when we started this business, the World Wildlife Fund did a study on all the luxury businesses in the world, and in terms of their social and ethical performance, nobody was scoring more than a C+. So we were kicking some butt in that sector too. So our company essentially does three things. We rescue materials, we transform them into beautiful things, and we give 50% of our profits to charity. And I get asked by a lot of proto-investor tourist types, why do you give so much money away? And I take them back to kindergarten. In kindergarten we were taught how to share, and then you spend the rest of your education learning how to be selfish. And I think sometimes you need to go back to those first principles. Sharing is actually a lovely thing to do, and there's cold-hearted capitalist reasons to do it too. The more money that we give away, the more awesome things happen to us as a business. The more people want to give us free, redundant materials. We have long-term supply contracts with the fire service to take their material. Basically, I think until 2037 is our latest extension. So, yeah, free hose for life is what I'm guaranteeing myself. And then you can extend this. If you're into waste, you will keep going back and finding more and more materials. And the second material problem, the real big challenge that we've decided to tackle, is the world's leather waste. Now, fire hose, niche problem, 10 tons a year. Leather waste, big problem, 800,000 tons a year. And this is post-industrial, pre-consumer leather waste. So this is just the scraps that fall to the cutting room floor. It's a beautiful material. And when we got this material, we decided to sort of up our circular game. We decided to I wrote a design brief for Elvis that said, designed for deconstruction. It said it had to be about play. So this is, again, back to childhood education. It had to be like Lego. And Elvis came up with these three shapes that you can combine to make, we started with rugs, but if you get tired of your rug, you can take it apart and make upholstery. And if you get tired of your chair, you can take it apart and make this bag. And 50% of the profits from our leather project go to renewable energy projects, because, circular economy has to be powered by renewables. Maybe we'll get some kites. Who knows? And then I think some of the lessons that we've always thought were really important, and we embedded in our business, were that if you're going to do something, why do something that has one objective? So the thing that I hate about capitalism is that people always want to celebrate turnover and the amount of money that you make, but why not multiple positive outcomes? Because actually, once you start down that road, that's actually quite easy to do. We make all of our business decisions according to one sort of question: will this make the world better for other people's grandchildren? Yes or no? And that's quite black or white for us. If it's no, then we don't do it. The big thing for us is particularly with circularity is longevity. We repair for free for life. We believe in the products that we make, and guess what? You get more loyalty. You get more customers that way. So it works out. And then I guess I'm sort of always trying to think about openness. What's the point in me having secrets? We might as well share the whole history of all of our failures and everything that we've done, and everywhere that our education, our continuing education, is taking us. Because we want to redefine luxury. It shouldn't be for the industry to tell me what luxury is. Why can't I tell luxury what luxury should be? Or why can't I decide what a luxury is for me? And I think the only figures that I'll ever really talk about is that right now it costs about 410 pounds to put a ton of waste leather in the ground. That's the cost to a business. We can transform that into 100,000 pounds of value. So why is it sensible to bury leather?
Hello everyone, my name is Cedric and I just graduated from UWC Dilijan this May 2017, and I came to Armenia 2 years ago, selected as UWC Dilijan student, and had the great opportunity to live 2 years long, great community from 70 different countries. And from the very beginning I fell in love with this beautiful country and with this extremely warm-hearted people there. However, there was also one major issue, and this issue is very much connected to what we are talking about today, and it was waste. So as in many other developing countries, waste, especially electronic waste, plastic waste, or aluminum waste, has become a really serious threat to the environment, also in Armenia. So you can imagine you go in Armenia for a beautiful hike, and you go somewhere where you believe nobody ever has been there before. However, you will find waste weighing around for sure. So while I was in school, I read an article one day on BBC about electronic waste recycling in Egypt, where one guy started just taking the electronic waste and dismantling it and extracting the resources out of it again. So at this time I was thinking, there is a possibility to actually take this waste, make it a resource, create a resource out of it, and be able to give something back to the country, to have a real impact, to clean the environment, to create a lot of jobs, and also to make the country more sustainability. So at this point, I decided to found the charity foundation Rea Paga, which translates to Recreating the Future. And we are mainly, in the first year, we were working on raising awareness campaigns. So we went to many schools, we worked with schools and universities. We organized flash mobs with over 500 participants, art workshops, different competitions. And also this year, we decided to stay for one more year to continue our work and to found a project that is now implementing the first facility for electronic waste, plastic, and aluminum recycling in Armenia. So, however, I want to talk about education, how it's connected to education. So, first of all, as Harrison said really right in the beginning, education was based in the 18th century on the industrial age, but our days today changed a lot. So we have a really complex world today with a lot of changes happening. We have globalization going on, that markets get integrated much faster than they got before. We have free movement of labor and resources, and this brings a lot of new challenges like the global climate change, the European refugee crisis, and so on and so forth. And we don't have any curriculum in the world that can give us all the knowledge required to solve these problems. There's just none. But however, education is not just about the acquisition of knowledge, but also about the acquisition of values, of skills, and beliefs. And in my opinion, we have to focus much more on these three things. Skills, like critical thinking, complex problem solving, or creativity. Values such as responsibility, respect, sustainability, and beliefs that everybody, every single one of us, no matter how old are you, or where you're coming from, what gender you have, you're able to change this world and make it a better place. So now talking about it practically, how can we implement that? Education is the basic, like everything starts with education. We couldn't have a strong economy without our educational system. And education itself is delivered mostly in schools and universities. And in my opinion, the pillars of this are the teachers. So the teachers, they have to take a key role and be a role model for the students, be a role model to take action, to be engaged in the society, to teach the children from the very beginning to take responsibility for the environment and have respect for other students. And not just by telling it to the students, but by actively living it. So practically, the UWC students are selected in a long selection process actually, where you have different interviews, different games that you're playing, where you see like how you behave in a group. So a way to enforce this actually is by not taking less care of the degrees that the teacher says, but more about the skills, about the values that the teacher brings. Second thing is the school timetable. We need a timetable that allows free space for students to actually create their own skills, or like develop their own skills and work on their own project like we were able to do, to also fail and to be able to fail. Yeah? And the third thing is the management of the school management team, that needs to have a strong trust to the students and to the teachers to try new things. A strong trust also that the students are able to stand up again once they fail. And also a strong trust that the students are able to make a difference. And all of that together, all of that will create a strong belief, I believe, in every single student, that they are able to change the world, to make it a better place, a place that can sustain in the long run, and a place with people being able to solve the current problems and the future problems with critical thinking, with creativity, and with people that take responsibility for our planet and that have respect for our environment. Thank you very much.
Good evening. You took my whole slide away there, Cedric. I'm Proserpina Dlamini Fisher. I'm the not so new anymore Director of Education, but I've just joined the movement, or rather should I say rejoined it, beginning of August this year. And I'm an alum from Swaziland, and I am Swazi Waterford down in Southern Africa. And thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. I thought just because my role is new, I'd start with highlighting the first few things that I've been focusing on, because I do know we have quite a few alum here this evening. The first piece is developing the UWC Leadership Development Program, and that is because, I hope I'm not gonna break this. No, voila. We've just recently been growing, which is very exciting, I think, in the organization. And we actually have our 17th college right now, which is actually very important for us because we are growing, which means we're also opening access to more students to join our organization and debate and experience the whole UWC piece. I'm also working with developing our short courses and working in the international office. It's to connect the colleges and the office as well. But one of the more exciting pieces I'm definitely working on is educational outreach, and that's why we're here tonight. It's working with strategic partners like the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, the International Baccalaureate, working with Ashoka and Teach for All to actually start doing what should have been done years ago, which is rethinking education. We're in a place where, at the moment, it's actually a very crowded space, which excites me because then it means that everyone is thinking about what education is. And when we did start education, it was because of the industrial age, it was because of the agricultural age, but right now it's a totally different age. We're talking global, we're talking about technology, we're talking about sustainability, we're talking about peace. There's so many different pieces that have come together to make education not just kids going to school and leaving, but it's more about what are they doing, what are they thinking. Cedric is right, it is about critical thinking skills because we have to rethink, and the teachers, the school leaders are the important people that make it important for us to move on in our thinking. The UWC movement has come up with a model which is new but not very new. It's been around for I think a year and a bit now, which is very important, and what it has done is it's brought together everything that UWC is in one model. It's a holistic model. It encompasses the child, the individual. It encompasses what we believe in, which is in our mission statement, and the peace and sustainability continue to be very important. In looking at the questions as in why we're here this evening, active learning, and it has been mentioned, is very important. Project-based, we're doing more and more of that within UWC, but we're looking at how we educate children in the real world and how we're making education something that's relevant and important for us today. When you start rethinking how we educate, it is important that we have visionary leaders as well who are able to allow what Cedric was saying, the spaces, the time, the resources. They should be training teachers as well so that it's past the academia, which many of us experience here, but kids are coming together, and with these partnerships that we have, they're coming together and looking at what is a local issue, what is a local challenge, what is a local problem, and how can we fix it. So within the educational model also, you want students to be empathetic, you want the school body to be empathetic and feel and be human, but also be intelligent and be critical thinkers and think about the world in the future. Now is important, now has to be relevant, but it's also ever so important to be thinking about what do we need to be doing when we're in schools today to make sure that there is a tomorrow. And the more you hear about what is happening in education, the more you talk with educators, it's very exciting for me to realize that more and more people are realizing that we've created an education and it's almost like a revolution in education where we realize that it's time to do something. We realize that as schools, we can't do it on our own. We have partners to do that with. But in UWC, we also have the alum who can participate and be a part of this revolution through short courses, through visiting the schools and colleges, and actually sharing expertise that will ensure that we have a world for us in the years to come. Thank you.
Also a conversation with our live audience who are joining us online through the Disruptive Innovation Festival website. So please do post your questions on the hashtag thinkdiff.co for, so I can pitch those to the panel over this Q&A period. Before I get the pleasure of pitching some of my questions to the panel in a moment, I did just want to ask you a question who've joined us today. You've made the effort to be here. Some of you may be local, others who've come from further afield. And this event was, titled Educating for an Economy That Works. And at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, we're continuously thinking about how we can stimulate that shift that Proserpina was just talking about, that global shift in what education is, what role it's playing in an economy that can work in the long term. And I wanted just to get a raise of hands from you here in the audience with us this evening of who feels that at this moment in time you are clear on what role you're already playing or what role you want to play in that change initiative. So could I just get a sense of who feels that kind of clarity on your personal role in that change? We've got, a few people. Cool, that's good to hear. And I think we're going to have some participation throughout the Q&A. We also want after this event for you to talk with each other and explore as a community of alumni and people who are very active in this network what role you can play as individuals, as kind of change agents within this global initiative. So I just wanted to cue in. There was a lot that came up in those talks there. There was a really nice piece, Cressy, you mentioned it, and it came up with Cedric as well about failure. And I think that some of the work that MIT Media Lab have been doing recently on kind of lifelong kindergarten, and you mentioned kindergarten as being a real kind of context for learning that has helped you in the work that you've done, Cressy, which I think is hugely inspiring and really takes a huge amount of aspects of what the circular economy is from a materials perspective, but also from a business model perspective. So I wanted to ask a question, because you talked about kindergarten being central, and of course kindergarten encourages play. It celebrates failure in a way that the school system doesn't. But what about values? Because when we were talking before this session, you were sharing the role of values in how you've set up your organisation. And so I wanted just for you to start us off on the role of kindergarten in that play and failure piece, and then also talk about what has helped shape your values, either within the formal education throughout your life, or maybe it's happened more informally. Thank you.
I guess I'm not very good at making things. I've never been very good at making things. So at kindergarten where you get to play, I enjoyed making really ugly, terrible things, and that just continued. And I got very, very lucky in that my business partner, Elvis, is really, really gifted. And so I continued to make really, really hideous pieces of nonsense, and then he transforms them into lovely things. But I mean, failure is something that people always see as a negative, and I just think it's part of a process, because if you haven't tried something, then you won't fail. But if you don't ever want to, if you need to try, you need to fail in order to sort of keep going. And actually, the best thing that we could ever do with Firehose may not be luxury items. The last 12 years of turning Firehose into luxury accessories could just be one long failure. There might be a better thing to do with Firehose, and I just haven't discovered it yet. So I think it's just this view that you're never finished, and maybe I guess the values thing. A lot of people don't want to talk about values because they think it's better to talk about data and numbers and figures. But actually, if using numbers and figures and the fact that we've been profitable every year since we started helps me to make the moral argument, I will use those figures. But I think it's okay. It should be okay to talk about morality. It should be okay to say that you want the world to be better. And for me, UWC was a gift of an amazing education that I feel I will never be able to fully repay. I feel like the gift of my early childhood in Canada, which is a wonderful place to grow up, is a debt I will never be able to repay. Seeing a moose in the wild is a debt I will never be able to repay. Doesn't matter how long I live or what I do. And so if you wake up with that kind of on your mind, it doesn't feel like a burden, it just feels like a challenge.
Thank you. Cedric, do you want to build on that at all with your work, and particularly tying into that piece around what it, throughout your educational life has allowed you to celebrate failure in the way that you were sharing? Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, of course, failure, as Gressa also said, failure is one of the main things that makes you grow somehow. Yeah, you fall and you stand up and you walk on. And that's actually a thing where you learn from, and that was for us often, like especially with the project, but of course also in the education. I think I would have never ended up at UWC without being in my old school and not feeling so comfortable, without not failing, but having the fear to miss out on something, or the fear to be not able to have such a strong impact as you could have somewhere else. Like in Germany, many things are done already. I'm from Germany, and it's not possible to have such a great impact as you can have, for example, in a country like Armenia. So that always helps to get up. Actually, like failure gets you up, wakes you up. Yeah? You can imagine. Like I heard a really nice anecdote recently. It's like that when you're somewhere here, yeah, and built on that, it's not really strong. But when you're falling on the ground and you're standing on the ground, that's a strong fundament to build on somehow. So I believe it's really important to fail, and that's where you can actually start building something strong. Yeah.
Thank you. And I had another question for Proserpina. one of the quotes from our head of innovation at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation that kind of summarizes education is, we're teaching the irrelevant to the uninterested, which Ken Webster kind of references in a provocative way. You know, the content, the knowledge, the skills that are taught in a lot of educational systems are pretty irrelevant in today's society. And from a motivational perspective, they don't tend to chime in with where a lot of young people are in their own contexts. And so I wanted to put a question to you around how do we adapt our educational systems to become more relevant, and then to really tie into those inherent motivational aspects of learners that we need to engage.
Within a UWC context, each school, each college is unique. And as the students learn, the non-academic pieces are very contextual in where they are and what they're doing. And as learners, and I'm sure all of us here are lifelong learners, it's ever so important to be interested in what you're learning. I'm a language teacher before anything else, and it was my duty and responsibility to ensure that children wanted to learn French. And I had to do this in different countries in Africa and within Europe, but it's not an easy language. But when they saw passion coming from me, what you were saying, then I was a role model. And I think it's important that as we move forward with what we're teaching, it is relevant to the youngsters. If they're doing projects, they have to be relevant and they have to be able to relate to them. There's a lot of academic stuff that is very, very abstract and at times totally meaningless to children. And then we're surprised when they're not engaged. But once you bring it down, almost going back to basics and making them appreciate and see and understand, but more importantly, be excited and want to be part of the process, I believe only then will children learn and want to make a difference.
Thank you very much. Jack, I just wanted to pitch in on your view. You are a Smith MacArthur Fellow, which is a fellowship program that we run at the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. You've also designed some learning material at Strathclyde and done a lot of work around how you can engage people around the circular economy. So first question is, how do you articulate the circular economy to an audience who doesn't necessarily know what it is? And also, if you can talk about how what learning about the circular economy looks like, what has worked in your experience, and what works less well. Thank you.
Yeah, I guess just jumping to the second question, we were very lucky when we set this course up, circular economy course. We were essentially flooded with applications. We weren't quite prepared for it. And we hadn't even fully explained what the circular economy was. It was very vague, a few paragraphs. But there was this innate drive, this primal drive in the students to be part of it. And that was a very important learning for us, because we had kind of we produced all this content, and we were going to tell them what it was. And actually, from day one, it was more, what do they think it is? And how do they articulate it coming from their perspective? And then showing them what the kind of mainstream ideas of the circular economy are, and then trying to marry the two and getting critical thinking between, bridging the two. To explain the circular economy, I go back to kind of two facts. So at the moment we kind of mine all our stuff, all our resources. We manufacture it, and we use it, and then we chuck it out the bottom. And that's worked very well for 100 years or so. But in the next 20 years, in this middle part where we're using it, there's going to be 3 billion more people moving to the middle classes from lower classes. So that's 3 billion more iPhones, washing machines, houses, you name it. And 1 billion more people added to the planet. And And essentially what we've got is our resources and our demand, and our resources falling off a cliff, and our demand flying up in the sky. And the circular economy is the opportunity that lies between those two lines. And is essentially going to play a big role in the next industrial revolution, because if the next generation can find a way to meet that demand using less resources or using the same resources more efficiently, they ultimately come out as economic drivers and winners, if you want to put it in that context. So it's trying to get the next generation to understand, in the very basic terms, that gap, and marrying that with social values and the kind of inner perceptions and paradigm of how they think the world would work, and trying to get those two to work together. And that's what we try and do in our course. So essentially what we do is we bring in industry experts, or so-called industry experts, who are trying to do circular economy stuff. So an example would be some people who are taking food waste, and they've got some microorganisms. And instead of just chucking that food waste into landfill, or perhaps even better, just turning it into fertilizer back onto the land, which is great, what they're trying to do is get a few steps in between there before it ends up in the land, really maximizing the use of it. So they use these microorganisms to break down the food into basic chemicals, and then they build that back up into plastics and fuels and other chemicals that you can use pretty much across the economy. And the wastes from these can then go into fertilizer. So they've essentially added an extra resource step using the same amount of resources. And we bring these experts in, and they make all these claims, and they put out their business model, and we ask our students to distrust everything they say and question every single thing. And within 15 minutes, the slides go out the window, and you get a real engaging debate. And it's only through that debate that then the students can walk out of the class and think, wait a second, it's much more complicated, much more messy than what some slides say.
Yeah.
And that's the key part.
Thank you. Talking about a lively debate, I want to bring in some of the online audience and any questions from you here in the room. Just kind of building on what Jack was sharing there, if you're interested in some of this in more detail, there's an excellent session on the Disruptive Innovation Festival website from yesterday with Kate Rayworth on 21st century economics, and it plays to that point Jack was making there about meeting the needs of all within the means of the planet. And she articulates that very well, both visually and verbally. So we've got a question here on the session page from the economics class at Pearson College. My class want to know how we make time for project-based learning within the constraints of the IB. So, could I pitch that to you, Proserpina, please? Thank you.
Peter, do you want to answer that?
Don't sleep.
Yeah?
I think you should.
Thank you.
We have one of our heads of college with us tonight, so I think it'll be
Oh,
perfect for him.
Well, an idea I've been pitching, actually. Meeting James Pitt, I realized it was in Cardiff back in 2013 when we had our 50th anniversary celebrations, and the idea I was first introduced to the ideas of the circular economy. But we need to blow up the IB. And we do that, I think, by coming up with an alternative pathway. And for me, I really believe in synchronicity, and 2018 is the 50th anniversary of the IB diploma. 50 years is long enough. It's now the next 50. And I think we can do it, and especially working with partners like Ellen MacArthur Foundation and Ashoka, and we've been doing it, as typically we do in UWC, in a siloed way. And I think if we come together and share best practice and ideas, and we will be pitching this to the IB Director General January 19th, so cross your fingers, then we can have that huge stride forward. So I don't think it's possible within the current IB diploma to achieve this.
Thank you. So that's a great question that's come in online. I'm going to press people just to give concise answers so we can get through some more of these good questions. Did anyone else have something they wanted to chip in on that one? We're good? Because there's another one that's come from the same class that I also think is very relevant. Cressy, what are your products, where are your products made, and how do you ensure social responsibility in the production process?
We make all of our own products. We have 2 sites. They're our own sites. We employ directly all of our makers and craftspeople, so we are vertically integrated, and that's the best way to ensure everyone's paid more than a living wage, and that it's a lovely, wonderful working environment.
Thank you. We have another question. What are some practical actions? This has come in through Twitter. So what are some practical actions with which we can stimulate an effective shift in ideology behind education? As a UWC student and alumni and faculty member, when recommending these practical actions into non-UWC school systems, how can we ensure that we address our privilege of the UWC educational mindset? So I guess it's a little bit about how do we connect in from the innovations that are going on within UWC and share that with schools and educators outside of your system. Thank you.
At the moment, one of the pieces that is growing and I'm getting excited about are the short courses, and part of those is the impact also, but sharing what we're doing as UWC with other people, because it can be young students, but it can also be adults as well, sharing what we're doing and how we're doing it. Schools have the opportunity to also reach out to local communities where the schools are, the colleges are, and have opportunities at the weekend or whenever to work with them as well. And you know what, it's a world with technology today. There's so much that we can put out there and share and reach out to others.
Yeah, thank you. There's a question here, thanks.
Hi, my name's Sagar. I've got a question on the circular economy aspect specifically. I was reading an article in one of these eco magazines I get, and it was talking about the success of a activist in India, northeast India, in tackling Vedanta resources, doing their mining for certain products, whatever they're going to get turned into. And then wading through the article, he was like, okay, he's having a lot of success, stopping the mining and everything. Then I read the mineral that was being mined, and it was bauxite. And in other parts of northeast India, it's also lithium. And I was like, where have I heard of that? So I looked at the Minerals Resource Coalition, which profiles all minerals dug up around the world and what are their uses. So I looked at bauxite, and bauxite is the most prolific and prominent mineral, along with lithium, in wind turbines and solar panels. So my question for the circular economy, which I've studied a lot and cradle to cradle, is the knowledge that's being given to any generation is that renewable energy is great. But we are not taught where the minerals come from. So my question is that how fully circular are we looking at the impact of the minerals where they come from, yeah, when we then send those minerals back to the same countries like Africa and India when we don't want them anymore?
Yeah,
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Jack, can I prompt you on that one with your background in solar?
Yeah, it was actually a really big challenge for us. So we were working in East Africa doing pay-as-you-go solar home systems. So out, way out in rural regions, and we distribute these small panels with lithium iron phosphate batteries. And that was, we were scaling quite quickly, and we had quite an established supply chain. But the concept of the circular economy, so how we sourced our components and never came up at the start in design and the design of the product, which meant ultimately when we went downstream, it makes it very, very hard to either loop these resources back or capture them at all. So the first thing is about design. The unfortunate thing, the reality is that it doesn't matter how perfect you make your loop back, how well you capture these economic assets before they fall out into landfill or whatever, they're always going to degrade molecule by molecule. So it would be too idealistic to say we're going to entirely close the loop. So we will need mining. In the short to medium term.
Okay,
But-
well, I mean, there is space after this.
But I'll just make a point
I would
on
just
that, though.
encourage you to talk afterwards as well.
The point is that when we dig up through mining, the floods happen, we've dug up someone else's backyard. We've essentially, what we've done is we've raped the soil in other countries.
Sorry, it's just actually the live audience. I'm really sorry to cut you off. I know it's rude, but they can't hear you online. And we've just got 5 minutes left of the
Yep.
Q&A, and I think this is a really important point. And I think the whole materials palette piece is something that is being worked on quite actively, especially in the kind of makerspace community, of how can we actually create recipes for materials that actually fit within the systems that we're trying to get them to, either biological or technical. And so I do think there's also a role for material innovation alongside this. Jack, did you have a final piece there? Because I want to catch a couple of these other questions.
Yeah, just I don't condone unethical mining and all of those practices that you're mentioning. But the fact is we've got technological evolution that's going so quickly that this generation of renewable technologies will be replaced by more efficient renewable technologies. That's just a fact. This generation haven't been designed to recapture those resources effectively. So the next generation that come through will have to come from somewhere. The challenge to the circular economy is to try and figure out how effectively we can close that gap so we don't have to mine.
Thank you. Thanks for that one. There was a question here. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Xochitl. I'm an alum from Pearson College. I'm from Nicaragua, and I just wanted to pitch in on the whole UWC education privilege, two practical things that I found myself, and elaborating on Prospertina. One thing is that something is addressing teachers. You mentioned it. Right now, like one idea that I'm working on is making a short course for teachers and kind of like share that privilege of the type of education that we had. But also that implies knowing what that privilege was actually about in essence. And I think one thing that UWC allows us to do, and Chrissy, you put it in beautiful words, is that we had those 2 years to make mistakes. And we had that liberty to try out with the trust of our teachers and our staff here with us. So the other practical thing is also us alum getting into teaching in our own national systems, which is something that I've gone through and is definitely an experience that enhances, and I think I can live the mission through that too. So another one.
So, sorry, I'm not sure what the question was.
How we share, no, I'm not, I'm actually pitching in on that comment.
Yeah, okay, fine. Thank you very much for that. Any other questions? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm just aware that we've put a huge investment into giving young people a UWC education. What I'm wondering is how can we best support alumni to rise into positions of power and impact in the next 10 years?
Yeah. Proserpina, did you want to pick that one up first?
At the moment, we're working. We've started a study working with Project Zero, Harvard, to look at what the impact has been of the alum. We believe one must, but we do believe that the alum have done some great things since UWC have started. And for us to go into exactly what you've said, I think it will also be important to see what we have done. And we do know we have some really prominent members of our global community who are UWC alum, and we're excited about that. But to capture it, but also to encourage the sharing, we're changing in the UWC. We have a director of communications now who is making sure we're reaching out to alum, and we consciously want to be engaged with alum and do different things with them. And your question is spot on. That's where we are, and I think that's part of the vision we have with our new strategic plan. So we're en route. We're going to get there.
Thank you so much. There's actually just time for one more question, so if I could pitch that for yourself. Thank you for keeping it short.
Yeah, okay. Hi, I'm Valeria. I'm alumna from UWCCR. And my question is actually on power dynamics. I feel like we bring people from different backgrounds to UWC, but we don't really address the power dynamics that come with their backgrounds. So I was wondering, like, what is the UWC approach to this? Like, how can we actually recognize these power dynamics, talk through them, really make sure that we are aware of our privileges, and from that position, make the most out of our experience, so it is more equal, not dependent on your background.
When you say power dynamics, how do you mean?
I mean, okay, so when I think about my UWC experience, I can see the power dynamics of the world really mirror, like really expressed in the classroom as well. So basically, like, who leads the conversation, who feels empowered enough to have an idea shared or have that idea appreciated in the first moment, no? So I mean the interaction between your background, your race, economic background, age, gender, all these things that really shape your experience. Because in the end, it's not equal for all of us, depending on our background, and we have to acknowledge that.
I think that also links to the point that was made earlier about the community piece, and I think that, you know, as a community of alumni in this room today, and I think some joining us online as well, there is a really interesting role to share, to do, and to create new ways of thinking and new actions that support that. And I think, you know, it's great to see both Cedric and Cressy giving examples of demonstrating how they're experimenting, basically, and taking risks in this space to challenge the existing paradigm. So that was just one piece from me. I don't know if anyone else wanted to comment on that one.
I was just going to say education is a journey, as is the diploma program. So what does happen at each college is day one to the end. And I have to believe that after 2 years, the students who experience a UWC education take that power.
Great. Well, I'd like to just get, because in a moment we're going to get some closing comments from Jill Longson, and then close off to the live streaming. So if I could just get some final closing comments from you, because after that we'll go into some discussion in the room here, and I think there were some really interesting topics that were brought up, and I know we can dive deeper into those through some debate and discussion here in the room. But for now, if I could just get some short comments as closing pieces from each of you. Thank you.
Okay.
Jack, thanks.
Yeah, I'm actually really excited about finding out about UWC because I've been on a lot of programs in European level programs about experimenting and tying that into the educational system. And I think there's a lot of opportunity for UWC, such a powerful institution, to partner with these very big experimental projects at the societal level. So I'd love to speak to more people about this afterwards.
Thanks, Jack.
We run an open, transparent workshop. It's an hour from London, 3 spare bedrooms. Anyone's welcome. Merry Christmas.
I think I'm going to part with saying that we can't educate today's students for tomorrow's world in yesterday's schools. And so the space is open. We have a lot of work to do, and it's exciting.
Thank you.
And for me, just before I was at the UWC Diligent board meeting, and we were actually talking how it is possible to implement like project like ours into the education. And I think that's a really good approach to try to start making education more project-based instead of curriculum-based. And going this pathway, and I'm really looking forward to the UWC Diligence coming up with. Well, yeah, thank you very much.
Sounds like Peter's got a vision on that. Thank you to all the speakers. I'd now like to invite Jill Longson, who is Vice Chair of the UWC International, for some closing comments. Thanks, Jill.
Good evening, everyone, and particular welcome to everyone online who's been listening to this conversation. On behalf of all of us here, I'd like to start by thanking the panel. You were all very inspiring, very interesting, and we just got a real sense of the dynamic that's happening in this particular environment right now. So thank you. I think we should thank the panel particularly. I think this is a great example of where partnerships work very well indeed. And I think that where we share the same values, share the same focus, share the same concerns, and how we can work together in order to bring about positive action. It's a great partnership that we have with the Ellen MacArthur Foundation. It's wonderful that James Pitt is here. It was James's initiative back in 2013, and it's a huge benefit, I think, for UWC International that we have such close cooperation. As a fellow sailor, not quite the same level as Ellen MacArthur, I've always admired her as a sailor, but now we can admire her, I think, even more as a campaigner. She reminds me in many ways of Anita Roddick, the late Anita Roddick, who in the 90s, of course, was inspirational in terms of corporate social responsibility and bringing that center stage in terms of corporations. And Ellen MacArthur just seems to have taken it to a completely different level. And I think someone like Anita Roddick would be incredibly proud of what Ellen MacArthur has done and is doing. Of course, as far as we're concerned, we're delighted. In many ways, this enhances our approach to teaching sustainability and complexity within UWC International. We have a lot to learn from the Ellen MacArthur Foundation and a lot that we can put in place. And I think we've seen that within small work within UWC SEA and to a greater extent within the Mahindra College in India, where we piloted now this complexity systems thinking module course, which I think will hold us in good stead now as we go forward. This, in a sense, is laboratories of learning and really developing our curriculum, which is what is at the heart of a UWC experience. Proserpina alluded to the strategic plan and the strategic direction, which is a relatively newly approved document across UWC movement. And I'd just like to spend a couple of minutes giving you some indication of what's in that document. This is a great example of where UWC is at play at the moment in terms of both education but also in terms of partnerships. And I'd just like to give you a few more nuggets, if you like, as to where we're at. And it will be available online shortly, the plan. It was approved a couple of weeks ago in Freiburg and Robert Bosch College. It's been a 2-year process. Many of you in the room have been involved. Highly transparent, very consultative. We went out to all stakeholder groups across the movement. And we've produced something now that we feel will enlighten, inform, and direct the movement as a whole from 2018 onwards. There are 3 key pillars: seek, educate, and inspire. If you think of a house, we of course want to grow our impact, but we believe that these 3 pillars are the critical elements of what makes UWC special. We've been seeking and educating for years. There's a lot more in terms of what we're doing in terms of seeking now, and I can run through a few of them now. Education, of course, is our core, but the inspirational bit is the new piece of the equation. For many years, we've been very much focused on ourselves and internally. We are the best kept secret, which is a tragedy. We want to work a lot harder in terms of inspiring both the UWC current community, but also partnering with other similar like-minded organisations. If I just then cover a couple of things, I think the key thing in terms of seeking is the strength of the national committee system. We have 159 national committees now, 3,000 volunteers, many of you are in the room today. It is a remarkable and unique system, including in Syria, in terribly tough circumstances. We have one of our best national committees functioning there. We're developing a refugee program, which is quite a comprehensive program across the organisation, and we're developing a national committee fund to support the national committees in all their work. We would not be the organisation we are today without national committees. In terms of education, we have appointed Proserpina as the new Director of Education in UWC International. She alluded to the Leadership Development Programme, which is critical as we continue to grow. We need to build leaders through our organisation from diverse backgrounds, which is something that's very important to us. And we want to embed sustainability and peace throughout every part of our curriculum. And I think that's something where the Ellen MacArthur Foundation will be enormously beneficial to us. In terms of the Inspire piece, this is the bit we've been working on, Peter and I and others, and Daniel more recently. How can we bring together UWC community, and it isn't just alumni, it's staff, it's students, it's ex-staff, it's volunteers, it's donors, it's friends. How can we bring those communities together where you have like-minded interests and you want to make a difference? And how can you connect with each other? How can we facilitate people connecting with each other? Hence the reason why we've launched the hub. Hence, meetings like tonight, which are happening all over the world on an ongoing basis. Hence the launch of UWCX, which is sort of highlighting where we've got great initiatives run by the UWC community, living the mission, and how we can grow our partnerships. As Proserpina said, we've got partnerships now with Teach for All, with Ashoka, welcome to the Ashoka guys who are here today, and the UNHCR in order to progress our refugee program. Finally, I think the other key message is, of course, funding and finance. They're very much the sort of foundation of the strategy for the future, and it's something that we really are concentrating on now in terms of upping our fundraising capacity, upping our funding capacity, which is slightly separate, and sharing best practice across the organisation. So that's, in a nutshell, a very, very brief nutshell, what is now the UWC Strategy 2018 and beyond, which, as I say, will be available online for everybody. Finally, I'd just like to say, please join together to live the UWC mission. Please support and promote UWC and our partners in whichever way you can. And finally, please get involved, whether it's internationally, whether it's nationally, whether it's locally. Please think about how you can use your time, treasure, and talent and ties to connect and to make UWC what we know it can be in the future. There is so much potential for this organisation to really build on its values that we've got now and our foundations that we've built, and please be part of that journey. Thank you.